Ducati here. Today we're going to be going over our high budget version of his Scattering Calamity Titan. And we will have a low budget version of this build available on a separate video. But if you wanted the perfect build for Season 4, we got it. This build hits the entire trifecta. It deletes everything, tanks like a champ, functions on every budget. You couldn't have anything that plays any smoother. Let's take a look at some mapping. Alright, let's take our His Scattering Calamity through a T16 Abyss map. This will be an Abyss unique map with additional rare monsters, and increased difficulty and reward for each closed pit. This is, and I quote, one of the most difficult contents in the game. These Abyss monsters can scale up to 50, 60, 70 million health. They do a scaling damage equivocably and are incredibly nasty. Playstyle for the build is still just His Scattering Calamity. That's going to be all your damage. We can periodically drop curses, and so like this Abyss Rift will drop a curse on top of it so that we can do some additional damage to the things that are spawning out of it. You can use your Thunderstorm and your Firestorm as you get deeper into a really rippy Abyss if you need to scale your damage even further, but typically speaking, a curse is going to be sufficient just on top of the Abyss to help maintain your damage against these guys. And we are running a Headhunter, so we do get some nice Headhunter buffs every once in a while. Most of our Headhunter buffs are literally just quality of life. Move speed and ambush. We're tanky enough that ambush is only a problem versus Desecrated Ground, so you just have to keep an eye out on Desecrated Ground. Thankfully, Desecrated Ground doesn't appear to hinder our mana gains, and Mom is our primary defense, and so you'll be okay for survivability to get out of it, but unfortunately you'll just be immediately out of life because you'll spend all of your life as soon as it is available and then not be able to recover any of your life. So you do want to get out of Desecrating Ground as quickly as possible. And you can see we just kind of shotgun everything from a nice distance. Take that Abyssal Echoes. If you need additional health to drop more comets to kill large targets faster, don't hesitate to utilize your life flasks to spam through more health. That is a very, very strong addition to your damage, just to carry a good life flask. Take our little Divine Orb there as well. And we're at like maybe 12 or 14 pits closed. So at this point, everything is going to get both really rippy and really tanky. So you'll probably want to start utilizing more than just your curse to do more damage to them. We still need to close these up here. Go. The little divine orb here. This is some underground mob somewhere right here. Oh, I guess it's the essence mob. I have a few more abysses down here. That desecrated ground, it'll chew through your life immediately. So, like I said, survivability, you're fine, but you got to get out of it fast enough to get your damage going again. Otherwise, they'll chew through your mana. Got another abyssal overrun nearby. It's so fancy. All right, the map is done. We'll go kill this boss. Which, of course, is a joke compared to the abyss mobs. Boss down. Now, one of the things I got a lot of questions about is individual tech on the build. So we're going to talk about tech separately from the build itself. The first thing we're going to talk about, especially whenever you're coming up for the 1 div budget into the high budget, is Esh's Radiance. Esh's Radiance is really important for the build and should be your first expenditure of Divine Orbs on the build. Not only is it just a tremendous amount of damage for our character, this is resulting in probably 25% of the damage on his Scattering Calamity, but it allows your chaos damage to shock. That means much better clear, because we're obviously not dropping Thunderstorm on clear, and so this is multiplying our clear DPS by another 36%, but this also allows us to get a continuous supply of mana remnants, making sure that every target is affected by an elemental ailment. We're going to shock everything, and so we're always going to be dropping them. So this is great for damage, great for survivability, and is kind of the keystone for the build. Very, very strong. Now, other tech on his Scattering Calamity, Shon's Temper. Now, a lot of people don't really understand how this works, or don't understand why it's so good within Fusillade style builds, but normally we fire off projectiles like this. With Shon's Temper in, we fire off projectiles like that, and we generate these extra projectiles. They're going to fire in a circle around us. But because our hover duration is so short, it's going to release one extra projectile 20% of the time out in front of us, mathematically speaking, because we're generating shards. Whenever those shards fill up, it's going to fire off another one. Well, each individual projectile from our staff, which is firing 3 projectiles every time we cast, can each generate another wild shard. And so it ends up just multiplying the number of shards that are going out forward, as well as giving you more clear options. And also, while you're moving, those wild shards will then release and give you even better clear. And so Shon's Temper is also very, very important tech on the build. But this is cheap. Dialla's Desire, this is not tech. This is just extra damage. If you don't have Dialla's Desire, you can't afford it, you can just run a Lightning Mastery and get +1 level from there. And then you're missing out on 10% quality of supported gems, which is like maybe an average of 10 to 15% total damage on the build. But Dialla's Desire does give us 10% quality on our gem. We don't have a lot of sources of quality on his Scattering Calamity. And as you can see, we are at 13% more damage for each previous well sprite fired, which is an average of 13% more damage to all of our hits, because we fire 3 sequentially every time we attack, or 4 on Shon's Temper. And so it's somewhere between 13 and 18% more damage total from our quality. Now, we get quality on our staffing, we get quality from Dialla's Desire, so that is very important. So that is our tech on his Scattering Calamity. Blindside is just more crit damage bonus. We're crit capping with Blindside, high crit on the skill, and critical weakness, and then this is giving us additional more critical bonus damage on top of that. And then we're blinding, of course, on bosses with either Thunderstorm or Firestorm as your source of blind. Despair is normal tech. There's nothing here. Thunderstorm is, of course, Commiserate, Overcharge, and Shocking Conduction, which just gives us a tremendously large shock and then removes the shock from us with Commiserate. And then Coursing Current allows us to trigger ailments more frequently. And of course, those additional hits from Coursing Current can also trigger Cast on Critical, so we can generate energy from that from Thunderstorm. Firestorm, of course, is supporting both Blind and Withering Touch. Those are very important. Withering Touch is supported through both our Wicked Quill and our Withering Touch support here. And then Blind, of course, for Blindside. The Orb of Storms tech I'm using, but only on bosses. We have a very short Orb of Storms, so we guarantee that we're going to get these Lightning Infusions. The Lightning Infusions means that our Thunderstorm here is going to drop Lightning Bolts in addition to Fire Bolts, which just increases the rate and the speed at which we stack up our Wither. A Blasphemy Temp Chains, standard tech here. Cast on Critical, we are including Tool Stillness. This is what allows us to freeze bosses with a Chaos Converted Comet. It is very important for survivability. This is a tremendous amount of damage. So make sure you do include Tool Stillness as one of your major upgrades. The rest of the stuff on here is pretty normal. Finally, in Time of Need, gets Uhtred's Omen, which of course is +3 to supported skills with one other support on there, that being Compressed Duration. This pushes our In Time of Need from 700 to almost 1,000. And then of course, when we are in our weapon swap, we're getting this twice a second, which is what is powering all of the spells on our character. From our gear, one thing to note, make sure you do have enough Spirit between Warrior Invictus and your Amulet to support all of your links. If you're suffering on Spirit a little bit, Blasphemy is obviously what you'll give up. On our helmet, we did specifically go for a 3 augmented helmet as opposed to a better helmet. The reason for that is Idol of Ishta is necessary to get higher uptime on our comets. Idol of Egrin is necessary because increased damage taken is multiplicative damage. So this is 6% more damage, not 6% increased damage. And then minus 5% Chaos Res is multiplicative damage. And so these are very important augments, all of them. So I would sacrifice a little bit on my helm to make sure that you do have 3 augments here when you're looking at a higher budget version. Same thing goes for our gloves. We need 2 slots on our gloves. You want to run Venomous Rune of Spinning, and you want to run Tekrod's Gaze, and you want to have 16% increase of socketed items. Again, Tekrod's Gaze increasing our life cost efficiency, allowing us to spam more comets, and then Venomous Rune of Spinning giving us 12% increased cast speed with that increased effect of socketed items. Very, very strong. Headhunter tech, this is mobility. It also frees up some attribute points on the trees, so you don't have to spec into int on the top node, but this is more about the haste and the ambush teleport around than it is for anything else. And then finally our boots, we just want move speed. Move speed, move speed, move speed. So we have a move speed socket here, and then a reduced slowing potency of debuffs on you, which is also good. On our warrior, we are running reduced effective curses as well, and then chaos res as necessary. But we'll go over the gear in a little bit more detail. We just want to kind of talk about how the tech works. Specifically, his Scattering Calamity is enabled with a few things, and that is reduced skill effect here, reduced skill effect here, and reduced skill effect here. Normally, his Scattering Calamity has a hover duration where the, and we'll show you this by swapping it over to weapon 2, where we can't like that. We'll swap this over to weapon 2. Now on weapon 2, you'll see as we fire it, it's not releasing them. And then it slowly releases them. So slowly. Painfully slowly. This is no damage. So we get around that by utilizing reduced skill effect duration, which allows us to instantly release everything, doing a tremendous amount of damage, and giving us the ability to stack multiple projectiles in through our staff. And that's all enabled through this reduced skill effect duration over here. Now, I'll point this out a little bit more in detail later as well, but compressed duration is very, very important on this. Your Well Sprite release launch duration, 3 times your Wellsprite launch duration needs to be less than your cast time with Arcane Surge. That will guarantee that all 3 Wellsprites will launch before your next cast, generating 3 more Wellsprites. So that is very important. Now let's take a look at each item individually, as well as the skills and the passives. First things first, a requirement for the build is a His Scattering Calamity Unborn Lich Ravenous Staff. Ideally with chaos damage, enemies you curse have negative chaos res, increased damage with spells that cost life, and increased chance for a spell to fire 2 additional projectiles. Now, the additional projectiles is probably one of the most critical parts of the staff. We're using that to triple the damage on His Scattering Calamity. Because we have enough reduced skill effect duration from Forthcoming here, reduced duration here, and Near at Hand here, you can see that on His Scattering Calamity, we have a hover duration of 0.04 seconds and a Wellsprite launch of 0.06 seconds. This is accomplished with compressed duration on the skill. Now, since we are sitting at 0.06 Wellsprite launch duration, we have to make sure that our cast time with Arcane Surge up is at minimum 0.18 seconds. We want all 3 Wellsprites generated to release within this cast time period. You can test this yourself by removing Shons from your build and firing this. And if your total number of Wellsprites ever increases, it's because you have too much cast speed. So for example, it'll look like this. That means that you need to remove some cast speed from your build, or you need to get compressed duration on His Scattering Calamity. Now, if you have very low cast speed, instead of compressed duration, you can run a higher damage socket right there for supporting it if you don't need the additional reduced Wellsprite launch duration. But both things to consider. You need a low hover duration and a low Wellsprite launch duration and a high enough cast speed that you're not overlapping that. Because we are firing 3 additional projectiles every time from the staff mod, the rune here, and 2 points on the tree, you will need to maintain 3 times the Wellsprite release duration. Now with Shons, you can see we're going to always overcap our number of sprites. That is not impacting the ones that we're releasing naturally from the skill. That's impacting the ones that release in a circle around us from Wild Shard on Shons. And those are fine right there. Just make sure that you are paying attention to these breakpoints on your character. On staff, we're also socketing Hedge Witches for +1 level to all spell skills. And then ideally div rolling the staff until you get high rolls of increased chaos damage, enemies you curse have negative, and spells that cost life. And so those are important rolls, but you can just get a staff with the appropriate ones and then div roll it until you get high rolls on all of them. Ideally also get a level 20 His Scattering Calamity. That'll give you 5 links on the skill instead of 4. Level 19 could be cheaper, but you're going to lose 1 entire link off of the skill, so be careful of that. In this one, we have infused quality at up to 29%. You do get a significantly larger amount of more damage from each previous Wellsprite from quality compared to Ember Fusillade, so infusing that up to a higher quality is also a benefit. For our helm, we are looking for a helm that has energy shield, max mana, crit chance, and resistances on it. We did get a 2-socketed helm corrupted to 3 sockets, so we can take advantage of Takati's Soul Core, which gives enemies you curse have -5 chaos res, which is 5% more damage, and enemies you curse take 6% increased damage, which is essentially 5% more damage. Both very, very solid. We do need Idol of Ishta for increased cost efficiency because comets are spendy, and so we want to reduce the cost of those comets as much as possible. We can spam more of them out on bosses. For our amulet, we're looking for all spell skills, max mana. Max life would also be on here. Percent increased evasion is okay because we are using Warrior. Global defenses is good. Percent armor is also okay. And then for suffixes, we want crit bonus damage, cast speed, and our all spell skills, and then spirit on the amulet as well. You do need to manage spirit between Warrior Invictus and your amulet so that you can include blasphemy into the build. And so if you can't get an extra 60 spirit between the two above and beyond the 130 you need, or 160 you need base for cast on crit and mana remnants in time of need, instead of blasphemy, You can just run like Clarity, Vitality, Cannibalism, some other supports on Mana Remnants that are just general. But if you can, make sure you get enough Spirit. A plus 13 here and a minimum of 42 Spirit on your Amulet, actually 41 Spirit on your Amulet, is sufficient to get enough to include the Blasphemy Temp Chains. For a body armor, obviously more your Invictus with mana per socket filled, elemental resistances, or chaos res per socket filled, and spirit per socket filled. For our ring, we're looking at ideally all LE res, double LE res, max life, max mana, and cast speed. For our original sin, if you can get one corrupted with crit bonus damage, that is also very nice. For our belt, we're running a headhunter, ideally corrupted with some extra life. For our boots, we are running double-socketed boots with increased move speed and reduced slowing potency of debuffs on you. And then we want to run mana, energy shield, resistances. I would have rather had int on the suffix there, but energy shield recharge rate is what we got. For our gloves, we are looking for, again, double-socketed for cast speed and tech rods. Tech rods is massive amounts of increased life cost efficiency, specifically with 60% increased effective socketed items. And then, of course, ideally crit bonus damage, int or a resistance there, energy shield, and max mana. For our sockets on Warrior, you need to fill with whatever your build needs. I needed Chaos Res, so we filled with Chaos Res. A Greater Mind Rune for the last slot is also nice to have. And then Cracian's Rune of Warding resolves the massive issue that is Temp Chains maps. They're so annoying, and 50% reduced effective Temp Chains on you is massive. So do run Cracian's Rune of Warding. They are dirt cheap. For our charms, running a Stone Charm, a Thawing Charm, and an Amethyst Charm, all with Guard on use. The Amethyst Charm could probably be switched at this point now at 73% Chaos Res. I would run a Bleed Charm here instead, or an Ignite Charm. Bleeds and Ignites are very, very nasty. Running Lavinia's Spirits because I'm lazy and I don't want to hit a flask ever. And this just gives us an extra 10 mana per second. It's not a lot. Ideally, you would instead run a very, very strong instant mana flask here to spam in case you ever get in trouble. And then obviously an instant recovery life flask so that we can spam during Comet Storms on bosses to maximize our damage versus single target. For our skills. This is his Scattering Calamity build, so that is the highlight of the show, running Blindside, Dialla's Desire, Compressed Duration 2, Esh's Radiance, and Shon's Temper. Esh's Radiance, we don't care about the shock chance from cast damage because we're using Thunderstorm to shock, but it's just 40% extra cast damage for a cast build. It's very good. And then Shon's Temper is just so crazy good for clear that it's not worth giving up for a single target. It is a little bit of single target damage. It's like 20% of one projectile extra single target damage because one of those 8 will hit the target in front of you, but it's mostly just there for very, very strong clear. For our Despair, Heightened Curses, Cursed Ground, Ritualistic Curse, Magnified Area Cast Mastery. For Thunderstorm, running Shock Conduction, Commiserate, and Overcharge. This allows you to automatically shock any drenched target. All targets are drenched in a thunderstorm. Overcharge increases the effectiveness of that shock, and then Commiserate removes the shock from you that you get from Overcharge, and instead afflicts a larger shock to the target. And so you've got a way to remove your shock, inflict large shocks, and automatically shock. And then finally, Coursing Current. This just gives you extra buildup for your cast on crit, because these Coursing Currents can crit and do a little bit of damage. And then Efficiency 2, just for life cost. We could probably pull Efficiency 2 at this point, but there's not a lot of, like, you just run like Considered Casting in here, so Coursing Current hits harder, so your cast on crit triggers more frequently. Firestorm, Magnified Area, Prolonged Duration, Withering Touch, Extraction, and Blind 2. All of these, Despair, Thunderstorm, and Firestorm, are on Weapon Swap 2. Weapon Swap 2 is where we run Wicked Quill and Effigy of Cruelty. So Effigy of Cruelty applies critical weakness, which we get from Firestorm and Thunderstorm and Coursing Currents. And then Wicked Quill applies Withered alongside Withering Touch on Firestorm. Gives us Wither sources from Thunderstorm, Coursing Currents, and Firestorm for stacking up Wither very, very quick on bosses. We have a lot of increased effective Wither, so getting that Wither up is very important. So do utilize this weapon swap here. For our spirits, we are running Blasphemy Temp Chains with Slow Potency, Magnified Area, Ritualistic Curse, and Focus Curse. Cast on crit with Comet, Blindside, Efficiency 2, Boundless Energy, and Tool Stillness. Mana Remnants with Harmonic Remnants, Remnant Potency, and in time of need with Compressed Duration and Uhtred's Omen. I will say one thing, make sure you do have Blind on your Firestorm, because Blindside from Comet and his Scattering Calamity is a huge bonus to damage, but only if you have the target blinded. And then, of course, Firestorm's Magnified Area, Prolonged Duration, Withering Touch, Extraction, just like we said. Blind, very, very important. Don't forget that one. You could anoint something besides Cooked off of your passive tree that gives you blind passively. If you wanted better clear, you could do that. There are several blind nodes on the tree that you can utilize. This one is 12% chance to blind enemies hit. You cannot be blinded. Looks like that would be it. Maybe this one. 10% chance to blind. Yeah, so I would anoint this one. Chakra of Sight. It's cheap. Would give you a source of blind for clear if you wanted to take advantage of Blindside there. Now for our passive tree. Our passive tree looks like every Titan, Ember, Fusillade passive tree ever, just about. We're obviously using weapon swap for skill effect duration reduced, and a weapon swap for skill effect duration increased. I did opt not to run Adeluis and not to run Life Tap, and instead fully convert all of our skills to life via Blood Transfusion and Price of Freedom. I do think that's the best way to run it, but if you're short on passives, you can instead run Life Tap, Adeluis to full convert life your gear. But I think the extra socket is much better to have on the skill than the extra points on the passive tree. Outside of that, we go crit, 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 and crit. We are a crit-based build. We pick up a little bit of cast speed up here. Overzealous is very, very strong. And then our reduced skill effect duration here, reduced skill effect duration here. And then finally, the 2 points that we have, could be 3, depends on what you need. It is 56 plus 25 plus up to 27. So that's how you get your skills, fire 2 additional projectiles. This is very important. This literally triples your damage. Every time you click the button, the ability to fire 3 projectiles out at the target in front of you is tremendous. All 3 projectiles will collide, all 3 projectiles will hit and do damage, all 3 projectiles will chain and explode. And so make sure that you do have that as close to 100% as possible. I think mine is technically 99 right now, which I decided was just plenty sufficient for me. The rest of our passes, we have a little bit of chaos damage here. This, remember, enemies you curse have minus 3% chaos res, is a massive amount of damage. It's 3% more multiplicative damage, but it also applies to your clear because we are Blasphemy Temp Chainsing. And so this is a massive increase to your clear and good overall damage. And then obviously we have our crit over here. Where is it? Oh, Whispers of Doom. Whispers of Doom allows our temp chains to affect bosses as well as our despair, so make sure you take advantage of that. We do have a controlled metamorphosis diamond that is carrying so much weight in the build. For one, it frees up 5 passives that you would need to spend to get to Eldritch Battery, and it gives us access to Wither Away, Increased Wither Magnitude, and Pure Chaos, and saves us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 passives to path over to those nodes. So take advantage of this controlled metamorphosis. You can pick these up cheap with a higher penalty to elemental res, so you don't have to get a -4, -5, -6. You can get a -10 and just make up for those resistances elsewhere as necessary. But this is an important jewel, along with the From Nothing Diamond, which gives us access to Arcane Intensity and Raw Mana, again without taking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 travel nodes to get access to those 2 nodes. So From Nothing, controlled metamorphosis, very important. Finally, we have a Heart of the Well, double extra as. Ideally, Chaos plus something else useful, like Cold or Lightning would have been better on here, but this is the one we have. Make sure you get one that has low rolls on it and div roll it up if you want to save money. High rolled ones are typically very expensive. And then we've got a generic jewel right here, which is just crit bonus, crit chance, spell damage, chaos damage, nothing fancy. Again, a low rolled one, div rolling it up will probably cost you less than buying a high rolled one of these as well. And so that is how our passive tree is laid out. For our Ascendancy nodes, we are taking Colossal Capacity, Hulking Form. Hulking Form is a requirement and basically enabling the build with scaling off of reduced skill effect duration, crushing impacts for a massive amount of bonus damage against targets that are stunned, also making our hits crushing blows, which means they will stun at 70% instead of stunning at 100% stun buildup. We don't have a tremendous amount of stun buildup in the build, but that does come in handy for absolutely destroying things that get stunned. And Mysterious Lineage for 15% more max life, which just gives us an extra barrier for defense on the build. So that's our passive tree. We'll kind of talk real quickly about a summary of the build. Our defensive layers are mana, mana remnants, which overcaps our mana, high life, huge amounts of recovery through in time of need. My in time of need is currently recovering about 2,000 life per second, which powers most of our Comet spam and all of our His Scattering Calamity spam, but also gives us a tremendous amount of recovery when you get knocked down and stunned, or when you're not paying attention and you get too many hits and your mana gets ripped. And so make sure that you do have a decent amount of life pool. Don't skimp out on getting some life on your gear when you have the opportunity to get life on your gear. Make sure you are taking advantage of that. The rest of our defenses lie around just deleting everything on the screen, Temp Chain's Blasphemy, and like I said, a lot of recovery from Mana Remnants. This is way underrated. Mana Remnants spawns when critically hitting a target affected by an elemental ailment. This is no more than once every 2 seconds, of course, but it is a massive amount of mana scaled with remnant potency and harmonic remnants, giving us a ton of recovery on single target, and obviously recovery on clear through killing or by critically hitting. And so mana remnants carries so hard, very, very underrated. Make sure you do include this. Make sure you have harmonic remnants and remnant potency in the build there as well. For clear, it's crazy. If you need more clear, if you're on a lower budget or you feel like your clear isn't strong, take advantage of removing blindside and adding in the chain lineage support. I don't remember what it's called. I have it in my bag. No, it needs to go back in our bag. Oh, there it is. Yeah, Dominus Grasp. Dominus Grasp is skills chain 100% more times. A quick rundown on His Scattering Calamity. When you click the button, it fires 3 projectiles. All 3 projectiles chain 4 times. All the projectiles that chain will typically prioritize the last enemy targeted. So if you're clicking on a raider, you're going to hit him with 3 hits. Those 3 hits will chain away and then back to him for 3 more hits. When they chain away, they will also explode if he's nearby another target, 3 more hits. And then it'll chain away again for the 3rd chain, and then back to him again for 3 more hits, plus 3 more explosions. That is 12 hits to a rare that is standing next to other targets. With Dominus Grasp, that becomes 24 hits. It is a tremendous amount of damage for clear if you take Dominus Grasp because of the doubling 100% more chain times on His Scattering Calamity, and the way His Scattering Calamity prioritizes the last target and contains both a projectile hit and an explosion hit. And so make sure if you need clear, you are taking advantage of Dominus Grasp. It is very, very cheap. And that is the build for us here today. If you have any questions over anything, drop a comment down below. Come by Twitch and ask. I'm happy to help. This has been a lot of fun putting this Titan together. We have done a lot with him. And I will have a budget version of this character put together on a separate video as well. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Peace.